When my second child was born, only 3 out of 100 babies that were born with her condition make it. And usually they have a lot of health problems. God gave me the gift of faith. There was a moment when the doctor came and told me and was talking to me about it, and my mom was there, and she said, "We believe that my baby's gonna live and not die." And when she said that, it just hit my heart, and I knew that God was, that my baby was gonna come home, that God was the healer. So I remembered everything I'd ever learned, and it was the gift of faith talked about in Corinthians. So it's not something I had to work up at all. So she was born at 32 weeks. I was 32 weeks pregnant, and I didn't know that there was a shot I had received at 28 weeks that could cause this. So I didn't find this out till years later. That gift of faith just carried me through. At first they said she has a 50-50 chance of living. And so I listened to what they said, but I kept it in my heart. I'm bringing my baby home. But as time progressed, so many things happened that they kept saying, well, it's less than 50% chance now. It's this. You know, she got a staph infection in her lungs and had to be on antibiotics for weeks. She was full of fluid and eventually started to drain from her body. And they were really happy with that, but then it started to come back. She started to fill up with fluid again. She was intubated and she was on a high pressure ventilator. The tube got clogged one day and her heart stopped. So they had to give her like 3 rounds of adrenaline and chest compressions on this tiny little baby. And they said it was really hard to resuscitate her. I wasn't there at the moment when I came back in. She was gray, turning back to a normal color. So all of these things were happening. One day the nurses were preparing me. They're like, you know, her oxygen is really low and her carbon dioxide is really high. You know, things are not good. And you know, as a mother, these things are tormenting, and my heart still believed. I believe I'm bringing my baby home. But I called some of my pastor friends that were in the area, and they couldn't even go in because she was so sick, and they prayed at the door and believed that her oxygen level would go up, and it did the next day. So things started getting better, and she had a duct in her heart that for preemies often it doesn't close up. So they wanted to do a round of medication and hoped that that would work. So they did a round, it closed up, but then it opened up again. I mean, this was crazy stuff. Like everything that could possibly go wrong was going wrong. So they tried another round, and this time it didn't work. So the only other option was surgery to put a staple in the heart. Of course, you don't want this, but I felt like there was no other option, and I had a peace about it. So they went to do the surgery. They said it's like an hour. It's gonna be really fast. It'll be done. So we're waiting, an hour goes by, 2 hours, 3 hours. It was a very long time. And I'm just sitting there praying and just trying to stay at peace because I knew that God had her. And eventually, I think it was like 5 hours that they came out and they said, I'm sorry, there was so much scar tissue. Like her lung was connected to the back of her rib, and they had to remove so much scar tissue that it just took hours. The surgeon had never seen anything like this. And so her lung wasn't just hanging free, it's supposed to hang like a balloon. And that's probably one of the reasons why she couldn't ever get off the ventilator, because her lung just wasn't able to work on its own. So after that surgery, she was getting better so much faster. She was able to get off of the high pressure ventilator, which is, it's really a bad ventilator because it's breathing for you. It's not just a regular ventilator, it's actually doing the breathing. She was able to get off of that, and then I remember the day that I came in and the nurses are like, have you seen your baby? And I knew, I'm like, you know what, she's off the ventilator. And when I went in the room, she was on, it's gonna make me cry. She was on a regular, just a cannula, nasal cannula with the oxygen. And she was so tiny. It was just such a journey of difficulty seeing your baby suffer and not being able to do anything, but I knew that God was going to bring her home. And it was nothing that I did. I mean, I would remind myself of all the scriptures. I know I had a covenant with God, but it was a gift of faith. And I think 2 weeks later, they said, well, she could come home, but she wouldn't eat, so we had to get a G-tube. So I'm like, fine, I just want to bring her home. We got the G-tube, we brought her home, and now she is 13 years old, and she is healthy, happy. I mean, she's a feisty girl. She's a fighter. She's such a fighter, and she has such a love for the Lord, because I remind her all the time, you're a miracle. God healed you. He is so kind. He is so good to his people. And I know that her name is Emma Laurel, and Emma means healing, and Laurel is a healing herb. And I picked that out before she was even born. It just reminds me that God sees ahead and he knows. Even though I made a mistake, I didn't know I shouldn't get that shot. She was so sick because of it, but he makes a way even when we make a mistake. And it's a miracle.